Hey everyone, so today we're going to be taking a look at what's to come with the next frontier of AI models. We had a lot of new information coming from AI researchers like Leopold Aschenbrenner, who is a researcher at the Global Priorities Institute, and a few other interesting things coming from Anthropic, Microsoft, and a new research paper that was recently published which discusses the future performances of the next AI models. So let's get into it. So there's a few clips from the Dwarkesh Patel podcast that I wanted to show you guys where he's talking with Leopold Aschenbrenner about future AI models, and Leopold actually mentions GPT 4.5. Now, I'm not sure if this was a slip up because GPT 4.5 has not actually been confirmed yet, and given that this is a 4-hour podcast and was posted only yesterday, I'm sure there are many people who haven't seen this yet.
And then I think by 27, 28, if you extrapolate the trends and we'll talk about that more later, and I talk about it in the series, I think we hit, basically, like as smart as the smartest experts. I think the unhobbling trajectory kind of points to, it looks much more like an agent than a chatbot. And much more almost like basically like a drop-in remote worker, right? So it's not like, I think this is the sort of question on the economic returns. I think a lot of the intermediate AI systems could be really useful, but it actually just takes a lot of schlep to integrate them, right? Like GPT-4, 4.5, probably there's a lot you could do with them in a business use case, but you really got to change your workflows to make them useful. And it's just like, there's a lot of, it's a very Tyler Cowen-esque take. It just takes a long time to diffuse.
So yeah, it could just be a slip up, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they do eventually release a GPT 4.5 model, because going from GPT-4 straight to GPT-5 might be too much of a big jump. It is part of OpenAI's mission to deploy their products iteratively to give people time to adapt, but with the speed at which progress is going and the fact that it's constantly accelerating exponentially, I'm sure the jump from GPT-4 to GPT 4.5 will still be significant.
I think one of the first jobs to be automated is going to be that of sort of an AI researcher engineer. And if you can automate AI research, I think things can start going very fast. Right now there's already this trend of, half an order of magnitude a year of algorithmic progress. Suppose, at this point, you're going to have GPU fleets in the tens of millions for inference, or more. And, you're going to be able to run like 100 million human equivalents of these sort of automated AI researchers. And if you can do that, you can maybe do, a decade's worth of sort of ML research progress in a year. You get some sort of 10x speed up. And if you can do that, I think you can make the jump to kind of like AI that is vastly smarter than humans, within a year, a couple years. And then, that broadens, right? So you have this sort of initial acceleration of AI research that broadens to like you apply R&D to a bunch of other fields of technology. The sort of like extremes, at this point you have like 1 billion just super intelligent researchers, engineers, technicians, everything, superbly competent, all the things, they're going to figure out robotics, right? We talked about it being a software problem. Well, now you have 1 billion of super smarter than the smartest human researchers, AI researchers on your cluster, at some point during the intelligence explosion, they're going to be able to figure out robotics, and then again, that expands. And, I think if you play this picture forward, I think it is fairly unlike any other technology.
So what he's saying here is pretty crazy to think about. Like, we all talk about AI automating certain jobs like customer service, data analysis, things of that nature, but imagine when AI is automating AI. Like, he's talking about having millions of AI researchers, literal AI researchers that replace the human AI researchers to further accelerate AI research. This is essentially self-improving AI that can be deployed across all industries. Now, this is all, of course, still speculation on whether this is actually possible and how far away it actually is, but it does seem like we're headed in that direction. Here's another clip from the podcast that goes a little bit deeper on this topic and explains why this would happen if or when it becomes possible.
Training is not as easily scalable. Right? So training is very hard. If you just hired, 100,000 people, it's like, you couldn't train them all. It'd be really hard to train them all. You wouldn't be doing any AI research. Like, there's huge costs to bringing on a new person, training them. This is very different with AIs, right? And I think it's really important to talk about the sort of like advantages the AIs will have. So it's like, training, right? It's like, what does it take to be an Alec Radford? You need to be a really good engineer, right? The AIs, they're going to be an amazing engineer. They're going to be amazing at coding. You can just train them to do that. They need to have, not just be a good engineer, but have really good research intuitions and like really understand deep learning. And this is stuff that, Alec Radford or, somebody like him has acquired over years of research, over just like being deeply immersed in deep learning, having tried lots of things himself and failed. The AIs, they're going to be able to read every research paper I've written, every experiment ever run at the lab, like gain the intuitions from all of this. They're going to be able to learn in parallel from all of each other's experiences. I don't know what else. It's like, what does it take to be an Alec Redford? Well, there's a sort of cultural acclimation aspect of it, right? If you hire somebody new, there's like politicking, maybe they don't fit in. Well, in the AI case, you just make replicas, right? There's a like motivation aspect for it, right? So it's like, Alec, if I could just like duplicate Alec Radford, and before I run every experiment, I have him spend like, a decade's worth of human time, like double checking the code and thinking really carefully about it. I mean, first of all, I don't have that many Alec Radfords, and he wouldn't care, and he would not be motivated. But the AIs, I can just be like, look, I have 100 million of you guys. I'm just going to put you on, just like really making sure this code is correct. There are no bugs. This experiment is thought through. Every hyperparameter is correct.
One more clip I wanted to throw in before we move on is this short clip from Anthropic discussing interpretability. So the reason I wanted to throw this in is because we're going to be discussing some of the future trends in AI and looking at some predictions later in this video. And I think this clip really puts it into perspective on what's really going on within these models and the fact that no one really knows how they work exactly. It is important to try and look ahead into the future and try to predict what's going to come, but it's also just as important to realize that this is still a fairly new technology and we really don't know how it works.
Interprebility is the science of understanding these AI models from the inside out. Researchers like me are trying to figure out what the networks learned and how they do what they do. It's almost like doing biology of a new kind of organism.
We're focused on an approach called mechanistic interpretability. We try to build from understanding very small units into understanding larger and larger mechanisms. It's often surprising to people that we need to go and do interpretability at all, that we don't understand these systems that we've created. In some important way, we don't build neural networks, we grow them, we learn them.
It's a lot like evolution. It's a lot like the way that we started with little molecules bouncing against each other, and then you got very basic proteins, and then maybe you got cells. And in the end, you have us, right? But no one designed us to make sense. Just every generation, there's this grand progression of refinement and change over time. The models are the same way.
Now, here's something you may have not seen. It's a clip of Microsoft CTO Kevin Scott talking about the next frontier models compared to the current models like GPT-4. So just take a listen.
And so I think, we're seeing technically all of the things fall in place to have like really durable memories with the systems. Like reasoning, I think, gets a lot better. So, some of the fragility in the current models are, can't solve very complicated math problems and has to, sort of bail out to other systems to, do very complicated things. The way that maybe I would phrase it is if you think of GPT-4 and like that whole generation of models as things that can perform as well as a high school student on things like the AP exams. Some of the early things that I'm seeing right now with the new models is like, maybe this could be the thing that could pass your qualifying exams when you're a PhD student.
So it may not seem like what he's saying is much of a big deal, but when looking into it a little deeper, it's clear that his statements shouldn't be taken lightly. Because if you look here, this is a snapshot from a paper that was recently published called the Situational Awareness, and it's actually by the same guy, Leopold Aschenbrenner, who we just heard from. Basically what it's showing is the comparison between GPT-4 and GPT-3.5 and how well they perform on common academic exams. The reason this is so crazy is because you can see that GPT-4 is really just levels ahead of GPT-3.5. It's scoring in the 90th percentile in nearly all exams, and if you look at GPT-3.5, it's barely even passing these exams. So it's important to remember how quickly these models can get better, and based on what people are saying about the next frontier of models, it looks like we're going to start to see performances in or close to the 99th percentile on a lot of these exams, which at that point, I think AI will start to shake up the education system a lot more than it already has. Another thing I wanted to talk about briefly from this paper is this graph that shows the trends of scaling up effective compute, which is taking into account both hardware and algorithmic efficiencies. And this is pretty crazy because it's basically showing that just from scaling up these models, they get a lot smarter, which is something we already knew. But keep in mind, GPT-4 was finished training in 2022, and since then, all these major AI companies have been pouring insane amounts of money into scaling up these models, and compute has just been getting exponentially cheaper. So all this to say, I can't wait to see what these next models are going to look like. I'm expecting to be blown away as always, but that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to stay up to date on future AI news, make sure to hit that subscribe button.